isITethical is a service for responsible innovation in digital technologies in disaster risk management.
As the NHS reels from Friday's cyber attack,
Storm Desmond has now claimed a second
We're
victim.
living through a century of disasters, more extreme weather, more conflict in the world.
Now, the Department of Justice just announced it's launching a $20 million program to buy body cameras for police officers.
These fears about disasters and security are sparking a call for more and more data to be processed and analyzed to keep us safe.
This is the control room at Stavanger City. We're receiving some information about an incident that's coming in.
Important issues like trust or privacy or data protection, these aren't just values that you have in your mind, they are actually social and material practices that are transformed through the introduction of new technologies. So then it becomes a matter of how do you support these practices of enacting trust, enacting privacy protection and transparency and accountability with these new technologies in ways that are not just lawful and compliant, but also ethical, which may not be the same thing.
What I'm trying to design are ways to understand those practices rather than regulate those practices.
So as part of the isITethical exchange services, we have developed a tabletop exercise that is in the form of a board game. And it comes out of our collaboration with practitioners and developers who really care about ethical, legal and social issues and want to understand them better. They are asking us for guidance, for a one-stop reference point where they can find information and exchange expertise.
At the moment you have designers, developers, regulators, users, and beneficiaries, let's say it like that. And the ethics is just one of the subsets. And people is designing and thinking this is technically possible, but think about ethics is not my domain. Developers are thinking this is technically possible, but thinking about ethics is not my domain. Regulators, policymakers, users, etc., they say this is not my domain. But playing with ethics along the whole constellation and along the whole network is a way of rescue us of the syndrome of it's not my domain. It actually is our domain. We have to take care of it.
What you see in front of you is Europe in crisis. 1 cube stands for a hazard, 2 cubes for a risk.
There are emergencies popping up everywhere, and you are in the shoes of an emergency responder, and you have to take decisions.
Floods in Lancaster, of course. We've played locally with the police and fire services, nationally with the Lancashire Resilience Forum here in the UK. Internationally, we've been to Slovenia, to Belgium, to the US. The Red Cross and the UN are interested, for example, around quite sensitive issues of how do you share information around refugees.
There are responsibilities. I also have, as you have, during the game you come to the realization that you have to collaborate.
Ethical values.
And you find out that actually if you share capacities and if you share data ethically, you can respond quickly. It could be a ticket for an ethical conversation.
Data sharing for me already operationally is an issue, and I do have to consider it, particularly when I'm working with partner agencies who I perhaps don't know particularly well. I don't know their own protocols. So how much I can share with them about an incident is tricky. I have to think that through.
At the moment, the approach is very legalistic. There are laws, there are rules, and the ethical side of it is actually left behind in a very fast-changing, technologically augmented environment.
Readings for Honister Pass confirm record rainfall, over 13 inches in 24 hours. Severe flood warnings remain in place, and that means a risk to life across northwest of England.
We had a series of flooding and storms over the winter of 2015-16, and that resulted in the Strategic Coordination Centre being activated on a number of occasions, and on at least 2 of those occasions it ran 24/7 for 7 days.
As you well know, you're all from different organisations, you have to work together.
We ran it as a multi-agency response involving fire, police, ambulance, military, Coast Guard, Mountain Rescue, as well as local authorities, voluntary agencies, and everybody who is required really to respond to that level of emergency.
You have good working relations and good working processes, but there is some information that you keep close to your chest, so don't We share are producing so much data as part of our everyday lives, how we use our mobile phones, how we leave data when we enter the healthcare system. It's really important that we find ways of managing that data and controlling that data.
Privacy.
It's what gives you the trust between the agencies. If you're sharing data, but it's just within that circle and not going further.
In a disaster situation, of course you would want people to know where you are, what kind of medical conditions you might have, and it's perfectly legitimate to share that data in those situations. However, when do you close the door? When does the emergency end? When is the exception finished? That's really important for us to have control over and to know where our data is going. At the moment, our technologies are really badly designed to give us that control.
My second action, I'm gonna open a common information space because I think I need collaboration.
You've got to take care of everybody else around you, right? Everyone else who's working with you in a common information space. You may have different agencies, different countries involved, yeah? Is that right?
Yeah,
Am I?
I know. What do the
Anyone
others
else?
think?
Yes,
If
yes,
you're doing good,
absolutely.
you're building trust.
Currently, where we exchange data with other agencies, we tend to do it through data sharing agreements. So we document what we can and cannot share, how we'll share it, and the obligations on each party to safeguard that data. So there's a process there to try and provide those safeguards, but it requires somebody to sign up to an agreement.
So about trust, it's a very relevant card because it's the reason why I opened my own CRS, because we need to trust in our partners and have the same kind of regulation for the partners in the same. Otherwise it could be very complicated in sharing information, having different systems, different rules.
There are two problems with sharing. On the one hand, the problem is not sharing, so the emergency services, the police, the fire services, the medical emergency staff don't share data because they are worried about data protection rules, and there are also cultural and organizational reasons why they don't share.
So non-discrimination in the practice of thinking about ethics.
The other problem is that we are sharing too much information.
The risk of profile communities or people.
So the European databases, the Interpol, the Schengen border control system and the asylum systems are now being set up to have a common identity repository, which could lead to things like social profiling or discriminatory practices.
Maybe it's a product of the access that we have to the vulnerable people. So I think the non-discrimination is a good value to have in this common information space.
Privacy and data protection. It is important to know who has the right to read, write and delete in a collaborative situation. Use this card to request or refuse one data set from another stakeholder.
The GDPR is a very legalistic approach to dealing with the potential of new technologies, and it has a one-size-fits-all approach. So you have purpose binding and data minimization demands. Well, all of those things in disaster management might be suspended because it's an exceptional situation. So you may be able to actually search through data and access data that was collected for a different purpose, and that is perfectly legitimate and lawful. But where is the boundary of where this is ethical or not?
There's a balance there. How much do we share? You need to share enough to get another agency moving, and we've had practical examples of that in recent floods. Some critical cases, wrestling with those issues of what to share and what not to share.
What's the consequence if they don't?
In the worst case, people could die, but in other cases, they're not being hospitalised when they should be, or not being put in care when they should be, being left on their own, or with people who don't really know how to look after them.
As I look at the board and I see the common information space, and you start to see what would that look like in the real world if you had a common space and a common technological infrastructure, and you had one agency saying, for those of you coming, these are the things that I'm missing, which would give us a robust multi-agency response.
The new technologies that we are developing offer huge potential to have better situation awareness, better communication and collaboration, interoperability, But with that potential comes great responsibility to handle the data, not just lawfully, but ethically.
The legal departments, the regulators develop much slower than technology. Technology is going really fast. What we're trying to do is to do ethics with co-creation by integrating different voices, by learning about difficult and complex situations.
If we can do this in public safety, which is one of the most complicated areas, then that will also help implementation of new technologies in transport, coordination in health, in government, and also in our everyday experience and in our everyday use of technologies that are designed better to support ethical decisions and ethical practices.